now tuned in to the Cold Hard Truth, Cayman's #1 hard-hitting live podcast show, where we feature some straightforward conversations on political, social, and celebrity news and all things happening in the Cayman Islands and around the world. This show was created to give the people a voice and a means of being involved and informed without any filters. Sometimes it gets crazy, but we always keep it real. We bring you the tea, piping hot, so grab your favorite beverage and join the conversation via WhatsApp at 324-1612. Email tips at CaymanMarlRoad.com. Now, here's your host, Sandy Hill, broadcasting live from the beautiful Cayman Islands. Miracle Brokers is back. That's right. We're fully reopened and back to work. Our agents are here to serve you with all of your packing and shipping needs. Need to move? Don't worry. Give us a call today. Collect a package, shipping around the world, or straight to Cayman? You got it. Give us a call on 949-5989. Collection by personalized appointment only, where our dedicated agents are on standby to personally assist you. Don't forget to wear your mask, maintain social distancing, and one person per appointment. Check us out at miraclebrokers.com today.
All right, folks. Good morning. Good morning. How are you guys? Oh, my sinuses are crazy today. Woke up and had to reach for the Vicks almost immediately. You guys know how that is. Thank you guys so much for waking up and tuning in. What a fabulous long weekend. We were free to move about and to socialize with one another a little bit, have a good time. You know, some of us went to the beach this weekend. Others were trying to catch up on some work. So can I tell you, I spent a lot of time actually in front of the computer. And all day yesterday, I was on the road just trying to sort out some customers and making sure that they're happy and they are good to go. So looks like everybody's kind of sleeping in this morning, but I know you guys will be joining the program. So we're going to have the Music Association coming on with us here shortly. We'll give them as much time as they need to kind of join us and to, tell us what's been going on with that association. It's been a little bit of a rocky road lately, and the Mall Road has been rocky for them, and we're going to find out what that's all about. And I know that some of their members and executive committee are joining us in order to try to right some wrongs, is what they say. So we're going to get all the nitty-gritty details of what's going on there. Lots of questions about when Cayman's borders will be reopening. But can I tell you, based on what's happening in the US around the world, I think we better just hold tight, hold our position until we see some significant improvements, which I don't think are going to happen by September. So there's some new policy in the US where basically they're trying to tell international students, hey guys, might be time for you to pack your bags and get out of here. And universities will be offering courses online as a result. So we're going to post that story up a little bit later on this morning, because I think if you've got kids who are going to school in the US, you need to be very much aware of what policy changes they're having in relation to international students. So don't get them packed up too quickly, because they may be staying right here doing online courses. Alex, good morning. Cameron, good morning. Who else is tuned in, folks? Give us a big shout out here. Where's Jake? Where's Evelyn? Is everybody sleeping in this morning because we're on the heels of a holiday? Were you guys partying a little bit too much yesterday? Tell me, what is the deal? What is going on? Alex wants to know, still no money from Fidelity. That is crazy, Alex. We can talk about that a bit later on if we have some free time in the program. And the other big news over the weekend, last week I was telling you guys we were chasing up a story and trying to get some details on Margaritaville. So we finally broke the story yesterday in terms of what we have. It's not looking good. It's not looking good for vendors of Margaritaville. It's not looking good for employees of Margaritaville, or even some people who bought in to the Margaritaville property. So Krista, good morning, honey, and thank you so much for joining in as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the Cayman Islands Music Association. We have joining us in the studio this morning, Eden Hurlston. and Michael Wilt. So let's bring them both in. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning,
and good morning,
Sandy.
Eden. How are you guys
Good morning,
doing?
Sandra.
Good morning.
We're good. We're good.
How are you guys?
We're good.
Doing
I'm
well.
good.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Good stuff, good stuff. So listen.
Sleeping in wasn't a bad idea, I think, because we did a bit yesterday as well. We were at the beach all day.
I'm still asleep.
I know,
I just have
right?
my eyes are painted on the outside of my eyelids. So
You're still sleeping. All right. Well, listen, we got Krista here for it, Erica, Runika, Angel. They're all saying good morning. We've got at least 54 people tuned in. So we are going to get started.
Good morning, guys.
Cameron, I don't know if Cameron's live, but Cameron had posted yesterday after we scheduled the show that our music is supposed to be free. Where do we draw the line? When a price is put on priceless art. Big up to all the musicians. Your sounds are pleasing unto God, and no matter what price someone can put on your talent, you're priceless in our eyes. Sylvia, good morning to you. Tell us a little bit about what's okay. Let's not even get started with what's happening right now. We need to back up a little bit. Give us a bit of a history. Kimani is here. Thank you, Kimani, for tuning in. Give us a little bit of a history about the Music Association. When did it get started? Do we know whose brainchild it was? How has it worked in the past? And how long have you guys been members?
Well, I guess I can let Eden speak to the history, because he goes back in the association way longer than I have.
Okay.
So I'll let him speak up to, I guess, 2018, which is when I joined the executive committee.
Okay.
The past exec. So
right. All right, Eden, tell us a little bit about it.
Well, originally the Cmea was started in 1983 and 82, but the Constitution was filed in 1983, and it was started by Gary Ebanks, Edlin Miles, John Henry. There was a few people who were there as part of the founding. Mitch Halley, Ebanks, and it was essentially started in the 80s. Of course, we know that Cayman really started to hop in the late 70s as far as tourism goes, and we started to see the formation of what we know of now as modern Cayman as a tourist destination, and money starting to flow and all of that. And what was happening here with the very few venues that were here at the time, there were basically 5 or 6 major ones then. And now we have 40 or so places where music is regularly played, as well as many other smaller venues. A lot of shows were happening where they were bringing down foreign acts, and they were not having Caymanians involved, either in production or in being an opening act or taking part in a show or anything. And so the realization came that we have to, in order to protect our cultural and economic and professional interests in our own music scene, we should have something representing the musicians so that we can take part in these shows. And so they started to make sure that anything music that happened in Cayman had to have Caymanian involvement. Now, this is, some people have talked about this over the years as some kind of tyrannical policy that the musicians instilled, and it was like, we have to be involved. And that is not true. It happens all over the world. I went to New Zealand in 2006, and they had a opening band for INXS that was a New Zealand band. It has to happen. INXS could not have played there without a New Zealand band playing, period. It just, it's not going to happen there. And that is a common thing all over the world, that they want either production being manned by local people, or opening acts, or some element of it benefiting the local arts scene. So these folks had the foresight, and thank God they did, to give us musicians in Cayman at the time one unified voice. They formalized it, and they filed the Constitution with the aim, as the main part of the charter, to protect and unify the musicians in the Cayman Islands. That is the very first part of the mission statement, the charter of the CMEA. Over the years, there's been a number of changes in administration, of course, just like any other association. They have voting in, voting out, different focuses on things. But relatively speaking, relatively speaking, it has all gone very smoothly and basically stood according to its purpose. And that's why we see what is, for us in the music scene, a pretty thriving music scene in Cayman. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of pretty high level professionalism, and it's gone through different dips and dives. So for instance, 15 years ago or so, just after Ivan, there was a little while where there was like anyone who had a guitar could get up on stage, and it's gone through different phases of that, of where the musicians kind of have to rally around and say, okay, we're going to need to steer it back this way now to make sure that our music scene is getting presented properly. There's been phases of, really venues not really caring about who they hire and if it's legal. But the last few years, I can really say in my experience, it hasn't been much like that. There's the odd instance of where protection needs to be, put forward. There's an odd instance of where venues need to be, discuss things. But generally speaking, a couple of things have really happened, owing true to the original spirit of the CMEA, of where Caymanian producers, booking agents have really, and independent companies have really taken a grasp of it and ensured that we have Caymanians working by and large. And then when expatriate musicians come in, there's a process for getting legal. There's a process for them being with immigration, and there's a music scene for them to fall into, as opposed to coming here and just creating their own type of scene. That was done through endorsement letters saying, okay, it's okay for this person to work. The people in the music scene are saying, come and work with us, and you can be legal. You can get an amendment to your job, or you can get a permit. And we've seen, to a large extent, a relative calm and peace, if you will. And there's been a lot of opportunity for people to play gigs, to make shows, to evolve music. And for me, I've been playing in Cayman almost 20 years, and full time for about over 12 years, with no other form of income other than entertainment. Doing production and live music, some DJing for special events is my personal thing. Quite a while ago, I stopped taking out any amendments for a musician, and just realized that the talent all around here was the way to invest my time and energy. And so I haven't personally had an amendment out for a musician in quite a long time, which to me is, again, in my personal experience, is speaking to this evolution of Cayman having a high level of professionalism and a high level of talent and diversity. So we have Caymanians playing everything from world-class flamenco to, of course, reggae and calypso, the standards, and country music and beach rock, punk rock, all kinds of music, jazz, and everything from all around the world, right here in Cayman, being played by Caymanian musicians. And so when international musicians come here, they have a diverse, amazing scene to come into. And I'm very, very proud of the music scene, very, very proud of what the CMEA in its original spirit has done. And basically, some of the bumps that we'll be talking about today is that for the last 12 years, we've had one president of the CMEA, and the focus has been a bit lost to a lot of us in the music community. A lot of full-timers gradually lost interest in being involved in the CMEA. It was seen as a non-functional association. The endorsement letter process was made obsolete, basically, because there were some certain agendas being practiced around it, and businesses were being delayed because of wanting to get permits or amendments and not getting the letters in time to turn into immigration, certain such things. So some of the original ways of being able to protect musicians were weakened by things that were going on through the last decade in the CMEA. I was a vice president for a little bit it was 2008 or 2009, and I had to leave the CMEA because I didn't like how it was working, and so I basically have been in and out of involvement in the last 10 years or so, but stayed as part of a member, assisted from time to time at Museics. But basically, we've just been kind of independent in our music scene for the last little while, and the majority of full-timers have felt pretty disassociated from the association, if you will. And that leads us up to kind of this more modern age where the music scene is thriving. Like when we're talking about coming up into 2018 now, the music scene itself is thriving. A lot of diversity, a lot of talent, a lot of people helping each other out behind the scenes, some great events being put up. But we're lacking that one voice of an association that can kind of speak for us all and be a champion for our interests. And that basically leads us to this last few years in the CMEA.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eden, thank you so much for that very comprehensive sort of historical context of how it got started, and certainly how we got to where we are today. So it looks like, by all standards, like most things that get started in Cayman, the intent was really, really good.
Yeah.
And, it started out for all the right reasons, and people are trying to get involved to protect their profession, protect the music industry, to protect local musicians, which I think, as you rightfully pointed out, is something that happens all over the world. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to have the encroachment of talent. And talent is, when you look at just local talent in Cayman, I'm always shocked and surprised at how much local talent we have. But on top of that, you've got the potential encroachment of people trying to come in from overseas who, they've had venues that they could practice in and opportunities that others here in the Cayman Islands would not have had. So it really does become a little bit unfair to put them on the exact same playing field. And it has nothing to do with raw talent. It's more to do with opportunities that can be created elsewhere in the world. So it's great to see that this association was created for all the right reasons. But, as things happen, you can have good intentions and something goes wrong as you travel down the mall road, literally, right? Mm-hmm. So things start to go awry, and we're going to talk about some of those things this morning. A big shout out to Ricky, who has tuned in to the show. Louis is also here from Detroit, and he said he's having his tea in the garden this morning, and he's listening to CMR.
Motor City.
No better way to start the day. So
hi to Jerry Bovell.
Yeah, Alric is here, and Alric does have a question that we're going to get to here in a second. So, right. So everything is going along smoothly. Now, I must tell you that I personally have been hearing complaints about the Music Association. And I would actually have to go back into my archives to see how long ago that was. But I know it's been at least a couple of years. Like, seriously, It's been a minute.
10 years.
The people have been complaining. And these are young, up-and-coming Caymanians who are like, listen, we were trying to get involved in the Music Association. It's being run in a manner that is, not conducive to including everyone. So they didn't feel that it was inclusive. They felt like it was more like a dictatorship. And, they just were not feeling it. Yeah. So let's talk about some of those things and what has been going on and what has gone wrong with the Music Association. And both of you can certainly give your opinion and on why that's the case. Eden, since you've been in it the longest, when did you see things start to, in your opinion, go downhill, either from looking from the outside in, or even when you were involved, as a member?
I can tell you exactly when it happened. My very first meeting ever that I went to, I was playing music. I was playing with Cloudburst, Sean Ebanks, and Kingsley Donalds and Stan Trahan, and we were playing all over the place. And then I got invited to go to a meeting, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this music association thing. Yeah, I should get involved in this. Let's go and do this." So it was at where you remember Cohiba Lounge in the Falls from a while back. Anyways, they had a meeting there, and it was an AGM to elect the president and to elect a new exec. And I went there with I met up with Nicholas Johnson there. And at the time, I didn't know, I knew a lot of people in the music scene, but there was a large part of it I didn't know, because I was kind of in this one kind of stream of rock-ish gigs, and it was. But even though I was still playing with a good amount of people, but I was a little more just focused on my little part of the island at the time, or my little one genre or whatever. And so I met a lot of people in this and that, but Nick and I were chatting, and then we were like, okay, so what do? We need to come and sign up. So we go and talk to somebody, and we're like, how do we sign up? And they're like, well, whose side are you on? And we're like, what? And we're like, the musician side? I don't know. How do we answer that question? Music side? Like, is this a secret thing or something? And so I was just like, what is going on? So I go into this meeting, and the whole time, Sandra, I was like, what is going on here? And I mean, I was a young guy coming into the scene. And we sat in this meeting, and basically it was this, one side wants to take over from another side, and we have this whole thing. And basically it came down to one side wanted to facilitate how we have expatriates take part in our music scene. And one side was like, it's all about Caymanians. Caymanians are being butted out, And I was like, this is interesting, because I was just oblivious to this dynamic, to be honest with you. It was like, it didn't exist for me. And I'm not saying it didn't have any issues at the time, but every single gig I was going up on stage with Caymanian musicians. So I was just like, I don't know what the issue is, because we're all Caymanians and we play all the time and we're making money. And so, and then we got in there, and there was this election cast, and they had an expatriate who was an officer stepping down, run the election to basically end up facilitating them not even being able to play anymore very easily, because in the end, that was when Notch was elected. Mr. Smith was elected, and there was no presentation of platforms. There was no someone getting up and saying, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm the candidate for vice president. I believe in this and want to do that, and I see this as an issue, and we need to do that, and we need to enhance this. The things that you would expect in an election. I was just like, is anybody going to get up and say anything? I actually raised my hand. I was like, is anyone going to get up and say anything so we can know who we're voting for? I don't even know these people. But I have a vote as a Caymanian musician who just signed into this association for $25. Who am I voting for? And this whole thing happened. I was just like, wow, that was strange. And so all of a sudden, Mr. Smith was in power, and that was.
Now what year would this have been?
Oh, that was, let's see, 2007 maybe.
Okay.
There's 1 year that we're in 2020 now, and I think there was 1 year when another president took over, like a few years ago.
Okay.
And then.
So 2007, Notch, as he's known as, his proper name is, remind me of his first name.
John Eric Smith.
John Eric Smith, right. So he was elected, and pretty much since then, he has been president. He's had a stronghold on the presidency since around 2007.
Right.
So even when you went into the organization, so Isadora seems to know quite a bit about the history. She says it's actually 2009, and we know Isadora's been on the music scene for a minute as well. So as you got involved right away, you saw how politicized the process was, based on personalities and people kind of having this anti and for Caymanian musician mentality. So it wasn't maybe as inclusive as people from the outside may have thought. I mean, it sounds a little crazy.
To me, it was exactly counter to the spirit of music, is what I saw. I saw a lot of division. I tried to bring younger people into it, and they would come and watch people argue for 2 hours, and they'd be like, And I'd end up apologizing to them after the meeting. Sorry for dragging you into this. Just forget I ever said anything. And that's basically what happens. You're like, why am I going to do this on a Sunday afternoon? This is ridiculous. It's painful.
Right. So, that's crazy.
That's just being honest. That happened on numerous occasions.
Yeah.
Which to me is pretty ironic, because one of the main goals of the Music Association is unity, is to bring musicians together.
Right.
And we've been anything but united. You know?
Right. Now, Eden, you mentioned the platform or lack thereof of persons who were running for the executive at that particular time. And it kind of strikes me as a bit curious, but also a bit ironic, because sometimes I wonder, even on the political front, what's our platform? I mean, what are people standing for? Why are they running? So in many, many respects, it sounds all too familiar, I'm afraid to say.
It's a microcosm of politics at large in Cayman.
Yeah, and we've got some commentary coming in here. Kimani says meetings were all out war. Brent says, yes, 2009. It's been a dictatorship from that day. Now, I've heard this terminology before from various members of the Music Association, that basically when Notch took over, he had a bit of a stronghold on the entire association. Any idea how that happened? How does one person get democratically elected by members of an association? And then we're going to get into some of the details. I think our listeners, we're almost pushing 90 listeners right now. They would be interested to know some of the examples of what you guys have seen that, in your opinion, amounts to dictatorship. Like, give us concrete evidence. But how do you think it happens that one person can get elected, and then via that election process, all of a sudden they're just running the show? How does that work?
Okay. Do you want to go, or you want me to?
No. You go ahead for sure.
I can jump in a bit, and I can speak from my experience, and from speaking to other people, it's the same experience where you elect an executive committee, and they go in and they say, they sit down in a meeting and say, okay, these are all the things you want to achieve throughout the year. And we all decide together which projects to move forward, which projects need a bit of working, people suggesting new projects and stuff. And what you'll find is that where the other executive committee members, their agendas don't line up with the president's, as in Mr. Smith, what he does is he abuses them, and he causes them to get frustrated to the point where they just say, forget it. I don't need this stress. I don't need this headache. And so each time what happens is that people leave, people come with the good intentions. People want to see progress in music. But what happens is they end up being frustrated. They end up leaving. And what you end up is a skeleton crew, right? Run by Mr. Smith, right? And he's able to do everything he wants. And that happens year after year.
And the rest of the exec just rotates out with people who want to take it on at the time, or are willing to stomach it, or want to work with, and he remains in charge.
And what he's done is we have a constitution, right? And if you actually read the constitution, right, you'll find that there are things that he's actually been doing that he isn't allowed to do. Right. Based on the constitution, but there's a saying that knowledge is power, and so if you don't know what powers certain people have based on the constitution, you assume that everything is the way that it should, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I'll speak, and I guess I'll speak about that when we go into me being elected in the AGM of like November 2018. Okay.
All right, so Noel says you could not vote because it was prearranged. I remember when Mr. Smith was paying persons memberships for votes. Now, I'm going to talk about that in a second. That sounds like next level crazy. I never joined and had no intentions of joining because it was being run badly. You could not get your letters after paying your fees for upcoming events, and he did nothing correctly once he got in. Shameful. Purchasing of votes. And what's the membership fee? Like $25? Like, our people are so incredibly stupid. I mean, I hate to use that word, but I mean, it's bad enough when you think on the political front that someone could buy your vote for a refrigerator. But damn, at least the refrigerator is going to last you a couple years, right?
Yeah.
$25? What
it actually
is
has use.
$25? I mean, that's like lunch money.
That, that's part of the issue, Sandra, to be honest with you, is because in music, one thing that you see, and we have in Cmea, it's actually relatively easy to be a working musician, but you do see this thing of, if you value yourself low, then the venue will treat you like a throwaway product.
Right.
Okay. And it's just a mentality thing, right? So people pay $25 because, oh, I'll be a part of this association, and then because it costs practically nothing, they don't worry about getting benefits from it or whatever, as long as they can say, oh yeah, I'm a Cmea member. When it counts, they can raise their hand and say, oh, I'm a member of this thing. And so it's almost like people just pay the membership and then forget about it even belonging to it. And so if it was $100, right, which is still very low, that would give more fuel for the membership to actually power the revenue of the association. And it would give the association revenue to be able to give some benefits, right? So, but that is one thing, is that members don't see any real benefit to it. They go to meetings and they become nauseated, so they just run away from it and leave it. They see events being poorly promoted, and 15 people showing up at an event at the Harquail where there's more musicians than there is crowd. It's and this is just time after time and year after year for 12 years, and and especially when you realize that you can go on and have a very good career in music here without any assistance whatsoever from this association. We don't. Caymanian does not need this association at all to become a successful musician and working musician in Cayman. And that really shouldn't be the way. You should say, hey, I'm proud of being a part of this. This thing has created opportunity I went to this workshop and learned this, and I did this and I did that. And it's just not happening. And so again, it's not working in its own capacity for the good it can do.
Wow. Sorry there, Michael. Big shout out to a few people. We've got 106 persons tuned in, a few people on YouTube, and about 100 folks there on the Facebook stream. So thank you, Kenneth Bryan, for tuning in. He's got a question that we'll get to here in a second. Marian Ruiz wants to talk about the association's, articles of association and transparency. So we'll definitely get into that. Steph and Sophia.
Absolutely.
Thank you. James, thank you guys so much for tuning in this morning. So, so let's see where we're at now. So 2009, Notch is elected. A lot of people feel like that was sort of a defining point in the history of the association, but not defining in a good way, that he basically was able to do whatever he wanted unchecked. Marian makes a point that associations need to have transparency and how they're run, ethics and compliance policies, and that a lot of times they have these articles of associations and they don't even understand them. I'm willing to bet probably the vast majority of members have never bothered to read. And the articles are supposed to be how you operate your association. So as a nonprofit, people, I always get this sense, especially in the Cayman Islands, that nonprofits have no real sense of accountability. Like, I just want to do something. I jump up tomorrow. Oh, I'm going to set up a nonprofit. And I do that. And I start begging people for money because I'm a nonprofit. I go to the Cayman Islands government, and the Cayman Islands government actually funds a lot of nonprofits, and they try to help people out and get involved.
Sure.
What funding are you guys aware of that the Cayman Islands government actually provides to the Music Association? Because I think this is important when we understand that public funds are going into this association by way of the Ministry of Culture. And that to me is a changing. If this was just private members and you guys were kind of just, cribbling amongst yourselves, I would be less concerned about the impact on the broader community, especially if I'm not a musician, you know what I mean? But when I know that public funds are being directed towards this organization, we're going to talk about what is happening in recent times with the stipend that government has been going on about, this COVID stipend for musicians. All of these public funds are being directed into the Cayman Islands Music Association. And is it Cayman Islands Music and Entertainment Association? Is that the proper name?
Music and Entertainment Association.
Yeah. Then we understand that, we need to be concerned because somebody's putting good money into this organization. Where's the accountability and all of that sort of thing? So tell us a little bit then about how the government funds the CMEA.
And on the last report is $15,000 in grants was what was listed for 2019. I think it has been more than that before, but I mean, again, there's sparse records, unfortunately. But those are that's public. I'm not giving out any information. Any citizen can get information on an NPO.
Mm-hmm. So. That should be the case, right?
Well, it is the case. You just have to walk and go do it.
Yeah, but if the NPO isn't keeping records,
right? Exactly. That's the whole thing.
That information really isn't available.
Yeah.
So exactly. You have an executive. You've got, I'm sure, a vice president, a president, a treasurer, a secretary, supposedly a bank account somewhere. There's a checkbook. I mean, have there been annual reports in your opinion of how money is being spent, accountability, if an event is coming up? I want to talk about something specific that happened, I think it was early this year. This year's gone by so quickly, but where there was an event planned and the executive is saying they knew nothing about it. So what was a traditional annual meeting like? Or were there other meetings throughout the year? What was going on?
Well, again, Sandra, the lack of knowledge about how the Constitution is supposed to work leaves people in the dark. So in the Constitution, it says the Music Association is supposed to have 4 meetings throughout the year, one of which is going to be the annual general meeting. And then the other 3 meetings can be whenever quarterly, but the association has to have general meetings, and you can count on a number of on one hand the amount of general meetings we've had in the last God knows how long, and no one's holding the association accountable for the lack of general meetings, for the lack of transparency, for the lack of communication, and that has to stop. It can't continue that way.
Okay, so Brent says funding, no one really knows because financial statements are done ad hoc, and many times the financials are not correct. So there's no audits of your financials. There's no one on the outside saying, hey, you claim that you spent this, but compared to the bank account, this much has been taken out, this many checks have been written. None of that has been going on.
Yeah, because nobody has access to the bank accounts. Nobody can see what money is coming in, what money is going out.
Wow. So I'm confused. So at your AGMs, you guys don't get a statement to show here are the bank accounts. This is everything we spent. This is what we received by way of membership fees, donations. None of that has been happening. Wow. All right,
it has happened under previous administration. I want to make it clear that there have been some good leaders of the CMEA. When I was first asked to join, and when I first became aware of it, was I believe Bob Mosley might have been heading it up. And Barry Sukwape. There's been some, and they just basically ran it. When an association's running smoothly, it's like nothing is happening. It's like we're all just doing this. You go to a meeting, you hear this stuff, right. and whatever you're representing is just rolling along and growing little bits, and so that, I guess that's what I was experiencing when I was basically first playing music here, was like, and since then meetings have basically been like that person was saying earlier, 2-hour, 3-hour arguments.
And Sandra, just to put things into context, we're in July, and I reached out to the treasurer, back in June. Who's Lanny Brown, And I asked him, well, can I see a copy of the financials? Because according to them, there was supposed to be an annual AGM, an AGM on March the 1st. So if you were getting ready to present financials at the March 1st AGM, why aren't they ready? Why haven't they finished? We're in July. So all these inconsistencies, like what's happening? What's going on? Like the financials should have been ready for an AGM, supposed AGM on March the 1st.
And this is you now being actual president. You're asking for financials and they're still not available?
Well, you have to hear Mike tell the story from 2018 to understand.
Okay, all right. So let's back up a little bit, right? Yeah. So at some point this year, it's time now for an annual AGM.
Well, the AGM should have happened from last year.
Yes.
And it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
Any idea why?
Okay. So I guess Sandro, what I will say is that we got a lot of heat for actually wanting to come on the show and tell the truth. And we have
nobody ever wants to air their dirty laundry, right? I mean, we get that this doesn't make the Music Association look wonderful, but how do you ever hope to address these issues if people have no clue what's going on? Because what I have found is, you guys are saying one thing. Notch obviously has a very different version of what's going on. He has a different story. And by all means, Notch, come on the program, have a discussion with us, explain what is being alleged here. But if this doesn't come out in the open for open discussion and for people to even be aware of what's happening, what will change ultimately is the real question.
Right.
What greater accountability will all NGOs have?
You see, Sanjo, we have so many things to unlearn as a society, and then we have conditioned people to be afraid to speak the truth. I mean, we spend way more time thinking about the repercussions of telling the truth than actually telling the truth. And it goes back. And I like to use analogies, and I get that from my late mother, God rest her soul. And I find an analogy of a domestic abuse, right? So if the wife or the husband doesn't come forward and say something, then everyone thinks everything is healthy, the relationship is healthy, the relationship is fine, because what the public sees as perception and what happens at home are two different things, you know. And it takes a brave spouse to come forward, and that bravery will inspire others to come forward, and say, hey, wait a minute, that's exactly what it is, and then you start to identify a pattern of abuse and get to the source, and only by getting to the source can change start to happen.
Yes. And you make a good point, Michael, because I often stand in this program and sometimes I question if I'm the crazy one or if everybody else is a little bit crazy, because I do see things like that happening where you're targeted because you chose to tell the truth or you choose to exercise your voice that God has given you for a reason. Even on this platform, I'm in court for telling the truth, and the court says, well, in this case, the truth isn't what's at trial here. The truth doesn't matter. It's just a level of dysfunction as a society that I do feel that we are very much entrenched in, as you have rightfully said. Now, earlier in the year, I'm just trying to find when this was. There was a benefit that was put on. I think that this is one of those examples of where things are not being done the right way. So let me just go back and see how far this was. We've had a number of letters to the editor where people have tried to, express their issues with the Music Association. And it really kind of feels like it was getting nowhere. So this was back in November of 2019, so November of last year. It came to our attention that there was an actual benefit concert of some sort that was organized and arranged. And the only issue with that is members of the executive said at the time that they knew nothing about this benefit concert. So
we did
let's
not.
just back up. So the information that we had is that there had been some sort of a benefit concert that was scheduled for November the 30th at the, let me just see, East End Heritage Field for 6 p.m. And the allegations were that this was not something that the committee had engaged in planning. This, again, was the president of the association at the time, which is not Sean Eric Smith, just kind of put it together on his own. And then there were some questions about how it was even organized. So one of the beneficiaries, well, the only beneficiary allegedly, would have been Miss Jolly Conley. And I know everyone from East End and most Caymanians know that Miss Jolly unfortunately had, I don't know if it was technically a stroke, but I think she had some sort of issue when she was having a surgery a couple years back. And unfortunately, that surgery has left her disabled to a certain extent, incapacitated. She's had a very long road to recovery, and she's still, in the process of recovering. So this benefit was supposedly put on to assist her and her family. And as we all know, her husband, Renwick, is a wonderful musician. He plays all over the island. I mean, he's amazing every time I see him.
They're wonderful people.
Yeah, and I mean, she's the nicest person. They have just always had this reputation. If there's a couple you think of that you want to help, it is definitely them. But Renwick also is a very truthful person in the sense that if he doesn't need help, he's going to say to you, I don't need help. Go help somebody else who actually needs it. And I don't know if that's partly pride or if he really is like, listen, I really do not need help. And he just stands very firm on the principle of it. So he had posted something on social media to say, apparently he eventually found out about this benefit concert, but in the transition or in the period of him finding out about it, it seems like some lies were told. And I'm always uncomfortable when people lie to me, especially about what are seemingly small things, because I think if you're lying about smaller stuff, which this isn't necessarily a small thing when you consider what it was, but what about the big stuff?
What about the big stuff?
At your core, you're actually a very dishonest person. So it turns out that people were told, so other musicians and others involved in putting this together were told, listen, this is to benefit Ren and Miss Jolly and that family. And of course, everyone galvanized on the basis of that, because again, everyone wants to help this family. Hey, if they need help, whatever. Now, Renwick has shared that he became aware from others that there was a benefit concert being put on to benefit his wife. And he kind of felt like this is the sort of thing that if you're going to put on a benefit concert for someone, you check with them first. Number one, to see if they're actually in need, because you may be putting on a benefit concert for someone who actually doesn't need it. And in this case, he was saying that they didn't need the help.
It was announced on the radio.
Yeah, and this benefit concert would have been
how he found out.
Right. And he was saying that this benefit concert would have been a complete waste if it was just to benefit him and Jolly, because, they are not the most in need persons at that particular time. And he approached Notch about it. Notch said, nope, the concert isn't for you. In fact, Notch even engaged him in being one of the performers for the concert.
Oh, yeah. He was on the bill. I was on the bill in Gary's band. And
eventually it came out on the radio that that this concert was to benefit Jolly and Renwick. Now, how do you? I don't really get this. I mean, if Notch was trying to make it be a surprise, you don't then go on the radio and announce it publicly on radio.
Yeah, so it was on the flyer. It was on the flyer.
It was on the flyer.
There was a flyer. That's right. There was a flyer that was put together as well. And so there's all this promotional stuff. And on the other hand, you're not having a conversation with Renwick that this benefit is actually for him. So you have him find out through a flyer and through public radio. That just sounds crazy. What am I missing here?
So, and again, these are one of the things where if you don't have a functioning exec, right? Because I guarantee you, if he had brought that proposal, that benefit proposal to the exec, we would have said exactly what you were saying, Sandra. Well, we have to let him know. We have to engage him, find out what his needs are, find out if it's something that he's willing to do, and before we move forward. And that's why we came forward and said, look, he stopped engaging the executive committee months ago, right? So this was something that he did on his own,
Right.
you know. And what we would have said is, okay, well, if you don't tell the beneficiary you're having a benefit contract for them, isn't the perception that you're keeping the funds for yourself?
Yeah, it is a little weird. It is a little weird.
We don't know.
So we have others who joined in on the conversation here. James Geary says that, let me just back up here. I think I missed a few comments. He says that it's time for change. These young men are, oh, that's Jackie, sorry. Jackie, give me 1 second. James, and to address this specific point, James says, correct. We did not know of this event. It was done without our knowledge. Vice President James Geary here. I can attest to that, and we had no knowledge of this. So the executive committee, this is by all standards, a big fundraiser that's being put on. I mean, you're getting on the radio, you're talking about this, you're promoting this fundraiser, and the executive is saying that they have no knowledge of it, which sounds crazy. So who would have been involved in the planning of this event? I mean, how can you even plan an event of this magnitude without the involvement of your executive?
It would be Notch and a handful of other people who followed. And just let me go back and put things into context, because this is basically what happens every term in the Music Association. So we got elected in November of 2018. And so what they said was, okay, we're changing the financial year end of the association to line up with the government or something like that, right? So they said, okay, well, we're changing the year end of the association to March 1st, right? So that would mean that from November.
Sorry, Michael, I've just pulled up the flyer here to give people an idea.
Yeah. Okay, well,
you got a professionally designed flyer talking about this event that's going to happen. And it says, Renwick is playing, DJ Archie and many, many more, Stuart Wilson, all this stuff, East End Heritage Center. So, I mean, there seems to have been some level of organization to it for sure. Flyers were done, he got in the press junket and was going around telling people that this event was very much happening.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to what I was saying. So March 1st, 2019, should have been when we had an AGM from November 2018 to March 1st, 2019. March came and went, no AGM. So the executive committee met in April, and there's minutes of that meeting to talk about the fact that we hadn't had an AGM and to reschedule it. So the AGM then was rescheduled for July of 2019. July came and went, no AGM, right? So apparently the president in his mind is saying, okay, well, no, we just do it next year, March 2020. But hold on, wait up. You can't make that decision on your own as a president. What we need to do is what we needed to do was come together as an executive committee and say, look, for XYZ reason, right? It's not feasible to do it again for this year. Let's all decide as a collective, as an executive committee, that we're changing the AGM to March 2020. That never happened. There was no meeting. There were no minutes of that meeting, and this is one of the things that we've highlighted to the ROC, to the Registrar of Companies, and say, look, he had no authority on his own to change the AGM to March 2020 based on the Constitution, because those decisions are supposed to be made as an executive committee.
Right.
So what happens is we try to hold him accountable at some point, and he was like, you know what, I'm going to sideline you. He's going to sideline the majority of the executive committee. That's 5 of us, 5 out of 9 people, right? And what happens all the time is that these 5 people who are now exiled, they kind of go off in a corner, right? And they don't say anything at all, right? So from the outside, it looks like the association is operating as a collective, because those 5 people aren't saying anything. They're just going about their day, just going about their business. And then when the events come out in the name of Cmea, people assume that, okay, well, it's all a part of the executive committee. We're all meeting behind the scenes to make these decisions. And nothing could have been further from the truth. After a certain point in 2019, about April or May, when we have a WhatsApp group, for the executive committee. He decided to leave. He decided to exit the group, stop communicating with us. And we've asked him, we asked him after that. I said, well, you need to come back. I mean, we can't function as an association if you're not engaging with us. So we try to.
Sorry, just to be clear, the WhatsApp group was a group where everyone, in terms of executive, were able to
yes,
this
of course,
open dialogue and back and forth.
Of course, we schedule meetings, discuss different things, events and stuff like that.
Yeah,
he left.
So creating transparency.
Exactly. So he decided to leave that group. Decided, as he does, exec after exec, that he was going to run his own show, right? Okay. And you see, previously, these execs, they were like, okay, well, I guess that's the way it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to sit here in a corner and don't do anything until the next election, and then we do this all over again. But what he didn't factor in was that there were sensible people that said, look, we don't believe what you're doing is right. So we stayed together. And we were happy enough to watch him kind of do, because to be honest with you, he was putting on a lot of good events. Even though he wasn't engaging us, we were like, okay, well, I can see how that could benefit the music, the music scene. So we're like, okay, well, we won't say anything about that. You go ahead and do that, right? Even though events are meant to be coordinated, and that's why sometimes these events are executed poorly, right? But it's a simple reason, because he's doing it on his own. He's not engaging the entire exec. Everybody's not coming together. Everybody's not working together to do promotions, to kind of help to promote it and stuff. He's doing it on his own, and it's apparent in the turnout of all of these events, right? So here we are in the background, not saying anything, whatever. And then that same incident happened in November.
Right.
So we had to make it clear that we were not involved, because there's no way we would have been involved and something like that happened. So that's the only time that people knew that that the exec wasn't functioning the way that it was supposed to be.
Exactly. And that's kind of when it really became obvious to me as well that there were some serious issues going on. So Brent says funding, and no one truly knows because financial statements are ad hoc, and many times the finances are not correct. Marva says, I attended the last awards event early December with Fab Five. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful evening of entertainment, but very embarrassing. A one-man show, half awardees not in attendance, low attendance of audience. Event was not even advertised properly. It would have been an awesome event. Trust we will see a much better show this year if permitted. Good luck moving forward. Celia says good morning. She's watching from Rotan, Honduras. Thank you so much, Celia, for joining in. And of course, Isadora says that AGMs and GMs are industry standard for, just from the company's law. And those are things that all companies, including NGOs, should be adhering to. So Jackie says time for change. These young men are spot on. Alric has a number of questions. Alric tends to be a little bit long-winded. So Alric, we're going to get to some of your questions in a second here. I'm not ignoring you. Good morning, Morna. James says, also, no one has access to the CMEA email address info. This is the same email that endorsement requests go to. So we cannot track any financials received. When we request access to that email, it was not given. Wow. Crazy.
Right, and we need to be careful in getting into too much supposition with things we don't know, because there's a lot we don't know, but there's plenty that we do know. So I just want to make that clear. We don't need to. There's a lot in question, but
Right.
in sticking to facts, there's plenty to go
So
on.
is it a fact that there's an email address that you guys do not have access to that is associated to the association?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just wouldn't know what's going there because you have no access to it.
Right.
At the time, just going back to this particular event in November of last year, Renwick was moved to publicly post something on his social media page,
right,
where he says that it has come to my concerned attention that a charity musical event was currently promoted by the sitting chairman of the Cayman Islands Music and Entertainment Association, has been publicly billed as being held for the financial benefit of my wife, Jolly, and I. Please let it be known far and wide that neither I nor Jolly are presently in need or have in any way requested of any member of the public financial assistance at this junction. Although I am not too proud to receive well-meaning charitable donations from anyone when required, I cannot and will not accept them when there's not a dire need for such.
Right.
Should this event scheduled, I believe, for November 30th in East End come to fruition, I will not be participating in any form or fashion. And thus, I'm hereby publicly stating my lack of responsibility or liability for any actions on the part of the organizers or well-meaning contributors. So he's just trying to clarify that, listen, they're not going to accept the money. He actually says that he's not going to be involved in any fashion,
right,
form or fashion, which means that at that point that this was published, he would not be performing either, I would have assumed, because he's trying not to give the public a certain perception that somehow he's a part of something that he admits that he didn't even know anything about.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you, that's Rennie in a nutshell.
And I'll tell you why he sent that letter.
Mm-hmm.
He sent that letter after he attempted to reach out to Mr. Smith,
mm-hmm.
and was ignored. He could not have a conversation with Mr. Smith about his intentions about the benefit concert, and that's why he sent that post. That's why he did that.
He had to take to a public forum, and that post speaks to Rennie being a diplomatic gentleman, a absolutely upstanding, respectful man. I've been on a stage with him many times, and he is the creme de la creme Caymanian. You know what I mean? And it's in a lot of ways, that event was the impetus for much of the change that has taken place in the AGM in January 12th. And it broke my heart to know that was what would happen to them, and that he and their family was dragged into this without any intention to being a part of it. You know, they're such a beautiful people.
Yeah, I mean, it's embarrassing, I'm sure, to him and even Jolly to have people out there thinking that they need help when they really don't need help. I mean, we don't know anything about their finances specifically, but there could be things that are happening in the background with insurance policies or, other assistance that even those persons, had they seen this event and had he not responded publicly to say, hey, this isn't something that we're part of, we had no knowledge of this, et cetera, and we don't need the funds, that might have been thinking, wow, is Renwick and Jolly trying to double dip? Are they trying to abuse systems in place that are there to assist them? Like, we don't really know.
Right, and they would never ever do anything like that. So
exactly.
that was the way that he was able to
clarify certainly what his position was. And now, in response to that, a number of persons actually came forward, including yourself, Michael, and you wanted to clarify that the executive committee actually had no knowledge of this event. It wasn't something that was put on, collectively. And Vashti also commented about this. I think a lot of people were just shocked to see that this was basically a one-man show. And Renwick, he was thankful for the responses that came out of this. And he was just really trying to set the record straight from his perspective. So this is one example of what you say is sort of rogue behavior on the part of Notch. Can you give us some other specific examples that you guys have experienced or that you've come across where he's either been, in your opinion, less than honest or he's just kind of doing things on his own. I think the most recent one is definitely the stipend. So let's make it very, very clear. You guys had a general election in what month?
An AGM. AGM that was in January.
January 12th, yeah.
Okay. And I know we had posted that a new board had been elected. Now, it appears that Notch does not recognize that election. What's the deal there?
He didn't win.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
straight up plain and simple.
So the irony is, Sandra, that after this whole thing happened with Renee, that the music community found out that we were all still together, because usually what happens is at this point, the majority of the exec belongs to Mr. Smith, right? And so even if someone wanted to hold an executive committee meeting to kind of, okay, well, we haven't had an AGM that should have happened in March of 2019. Well, let's have an executive meeting so we can actually schedule an AGM, right? So when people found out that there was actually a majority of executive committee members still intact that could actually call an AGM, a much overdue AGM, they reached out to us. And for that reason, we decided to have an executive meeting, right? And we sent out a message on the WhatsApp group, on the WhatsApp executive committee group, right? Which Mr. Smith decided to take himself off of, because he wasn't going to engage the majority of the exec anymore, right? And we met and we scheduled everything according to the Constitution. We met, we scheduled an AGM, 30 days notice, send it out to all the public. January comes, we have a quorum of members who want to see change, who want an AGM, because they didn't get one in 2019, right? And from that quorum of members, we were able to elect a new executive committee. And the whole irony of it is that Notch went on afterwards, or Mr. Smith went on afterwards and said, "Oh, this AGM is null and void because we didn't send him a notice that we were having an executive committee meeting." Okay, well, all the events that you had in 2019, you never invited us to any executive committee meetings to have those events. So are those events null and void as well?
Also, he issued a letter right before the AGM.
Wow.
Even though we acted in the best interest of the association, right?
Yes. So these are the members of your newly elected executive as of January of 2020. So let's put some names for those of us who might be watching who don't know who everyone is here. So let's start from what would be my left. Who's this young man? Next to Izzy, is that you, Michael? No. No, the young man in the blue shirt. So let's start from that side.
Yeah, that's Super C. That's Cassius Stewart.
That's Super C. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I've just enlarged it. Okay. And then we've got Isadora, the young man, and the other side of her is
James.
And then we've got Michael. That is sorry, I'm just Vashti. And then who's the next young man? Clive, and then we've got Eden. So this is your new executive members. President is Michael Wilkes. Who's vice president?
James Geary.
James, okay. Treasurer?
Clive.
Okay,
Clive.
Secretary?
That'll be Vashti.
Vashti's your secretary?
Yeah.
Okay, and who are the other members? Do we have anyone like marketing? I don't know.
Izzy is assistant secretary.
Okay.
And Super C and I were appointed as directors.
And okay. Clive was treasurer.
And Clive was treasurer. Right.
So you've had your election in January. How many meetings have you had? Any meetings since then? I know COVID kind of hit.
Well, we've had tons of meetings since then. we even since then we've even had a general meeting. We've even had a general meeting.
Right. As a survey meeting to gauge what what we needed to do to act in the best interest of the music community. So we actually had a meeting March 8th, right when the dump fire happened, when when our mini apocalypse basically started. But we basically opened it up to invite all members of the music community and get an idea of what it is was on people's minds and give them an update of what was happening. And two things I wanted to clarify real quick were that I was listing the founding members that were on the original Constitution before. It's Gary Ebanks, Errol Watler, and Edlin Miles. So I just wanted to make sure to have that straight for the record, and just give respect where respect was due, because I forgot Mr. Watler when you were first talking. And then also to clarify something that with Mr. Smith saying talking about the meetings, the AGM being null and void, he actually issued a letter before January 12th. I think it was around January 7th, maybe, or something, sending it out and in public forums and to the members, letting them know that if they took part in this meeting, it was being null and void, and that we were a rogue faction and all this type of thing. So he knew about the meeting. So I just want to make this clear now that we're getting into the new election, on the January 12th AGM, that this is like the majority of the executive made this decision. So quorum was met in the executive meeting. I wasn't on the executive at the time. Michael was on the executive, and so was James, so was Vashti, so was Super C. That's the majority of the exec. And the president had the opportunity to show up at this AGM, present his platform, and run just like anybody else. He knew about it. We've made sure that he was involved in notices of it, and he even knew about it to the point where he sent out a letter denigrating it before it even happened, and then did not show up, and then just assumes to still be president. Everything was done by the book. A founding member abstained from voting in order to objectively run the election. So we met quorum to the best of our ability because we didn't have access to the most current contact list. So we basically reached out to the contacts that we knew at hand and made sure that we had 1/3 of the members that we knew of who were operative. And I just want to clarify a few points in the validity of what happened on January 12th. So this is like a sitting president ignoring the fact that the membership he's representing has called for an election. The majority of the exec that is serving under him has called for an election, and then he just doesn't show up and then still expects to be president. So that is what happened on January 12th. And we constitutionally voted in a new executive.
So just as another example of what we're saying is like constant breaches of the Constitution, right? So he decides that he's going to have a general meeting on March 1st. Now there's no notice of this general meeting, which you need 30 days in order to call a general meeting. So notwithstanding that, he calls I think he called like the day before, and then it happened on March 1st. So that's the first breach of the Constitution. So the next breach is that there was a clip of somewhere he said, well, we have like 150 CMEA members. I sent you that news article from Cmea Times. There were 27 people at that so-called general meeting. Now the quorum required per the Constitution is a third. So how can you have a general meeting that didn't meet quorum?
Right. There should have been 50 people there minimum in order to conduct business. And on March 5th, on Talk Today on Radio Cayman, sorry, Mike, but he announced that there was 150 members.
Right. And there were people who were part of forming the Constitution that were at that meeting. I don't get it. I honestly don't get it.
Okay, just a second here, Michael. Let me just find this article that you're referring to, because I think there's some bits and pieces of interest in this actual article as well. So Cmea Times ran an article. Let me just pull up the date of this. And so there is a question as well of potentials. This was the 3rd of March, 2020. There is a question about manipulation of the media to certainly present a certain position. So I have to ask this question because I've heard this information, and we might as well just be really frank and honest here and put all of our cards on the table. Are you guys aware of Cmea Times, Ralph Lewis? He's also a musician, right?
I think he's been a DJ for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
He's a DJ. Okay.
A DJ.
Yes. Are DJs members of the Music Association?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can use the term entertainer, basically. Yeah,
right.
As
music
the blanket term.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So does he have any affiliation with the executive, in particular, Notch himself, and the bank account of the CMEA?
Okay. So I think at one point he was on the executive committee, but that hasn't been for years.
Yeah.
So let me tell you what happened. So after our AGM, we of course, following all the procedures, we were filing with ROC. We're taking our minutes of the AGM and required documentation to the bank, to Fidelity Bank. So we actually met with a representative at Fidelity Bank and said, hey, we're the new exec. We want to present our new treasurer and president to get onto the bank account so we can have access. And so they went through and they started to look at the paperwork and stuff like that. And lo and behold, they're missing information as well. They're missing key documentation, right, that validates their current authorized signatures.
Mm-hmm.
And among those was a person that hasn't served on the exec for years, but he is currently an authorized signature on the association's accounts. And we flagged that to them. We said, hey, this person hasn't been a part of the executive committee for years. Why is he an authorized signature on the account? And they looked at it and said, well, yeah, that's quite peculiar. And so why would you leave an account open when there's someone not authorized to sign on the association's account? And it goes back to something where he said publicly that, oh, we got the bank accounts frozen and stuff like that. We didn't freeze the accounts.
Mm-hmm.
we made Fidelity aware of the inconsistencies in documentation, and they were like, well, thanks for bringing this to our attention. We need to do something about it, and that's why they froze the accounts.
Wow.
And it took a letter from the ROC for them to reopen the accounts. Now let's talk about the letter for a second.
Mm-hmm.
The letter says, as far as we know, Notch is the president of the Music Association. That's what the letter said.
Mm-hmm.
And our question is, how did you come to that conclusion? Because we've since then requested and received all the documentation that the ROC had on file for the Music Association.
Right.
And missing from that documentation is any minutes of any AGM. So we were actually expecting to see the last AGM that happened in November of 2018, which says Notch is the president, and these are the members of the executive committee. Nothing.
So let me just ask you this question. I know for normal registered companies, you have to file annual returns, saying that you held a meeting and were there any changes to like your members or your directors?
There was nothing. That was missing from the
NGOs as well. Are you guys responsible for filing annual returns?
Oh yeah.
We're supposed to be.
Most
and
definitely.
and that's one of the things we you know we're flagging to them. Is like, okay, well, where in a document package, where are the annual returns? And it's very frightening that a government entity would constantly give funds to an MPO and not making sure that all those checks and balances are in place.
Right. Well, we know that typical government fashion, the right hand has no clue what the left hand is doing. So
Right.
I'm
Right.
sure the Ministry of Culture, and we're going to look at some of his comments here from that article that you made mention of. He probably has no clue, and his entity or his organization, his department rather, has never thought to even verify or check those things. Now, for frankness and fairness, have you guys filed your annual return since your election in January of this year?
We don't have an annual return because we're not registered as the official exec.
Sorry. So what would you file with?
We're not registered.
They don't want
as
to
the
recognize
official,
us. They don't want. Go ahead, Ian.
We're not registered as the official executive. So even though we had a mediation meeting with Mr. Smith and Mr. Miles and Mr. Lanny Brown in it, and we met with the compliance folks from ROC and had a mediation meeting. We were recognized as a constitutionally elected executive. However, not Mr. Smith and his exec remained on the registry as the official executive. So we are constitutionally elected, but not official. So we have no annual return to file. We exist in action. We don't exist in.
Well, obviously that has to change.
Paper.
What's the way that you're going to change this? This looks like a legal challenge that's coming.
Well, we're hoping that, you know, from coming public with it, that someone is going to be sympathetic enough to, you know, help us address this, you know,
and that the agencies involved will ensure that this is looked into in the best way possible. So we're formalizing the issue with the registry and formalizing a complaint. Mm-hmm. And that is in process. So like I said, we've been quiet because of with the stipend thing going on, everything. We didn't want to possibly endanger or negatively impact anybody receiving financial assistance due to politicizing this issue. And there's still a couple of people that we're advocating for to get the stipend. So we'll be, you know, and we're working with culture on that. We've been advocating for some people that fell through the cracks in the last few weeks since the stipend has been awarded, and found success with them, thankfully, in addressing these things that, again, they probably just didn't know about because they're not familiar with all aspects of the music scene, and who might necessarily have needed the aid. So we're hoping to have that situation fully rectified soon. And that has, again, happened through the workings of musicians working together outside of the registered Cmea as part of our, you know, unified constitutional Cmea. So it's a confusing situation, but yeah, we're going to be clarifying things soon here.
And one note or not, Sandra, is that, I mean, he's made it public, right? Mr. Smith has made it public that he was instrumental in getting the stipend from the Ministry of Culture. He's made that public. And our question is, okay, well, there are Caymanians that didn't get the stipend. Why, you know, and you're not following up to make sure that they get it. Like, I don't understand. If you're instrumental in this whole stipend process, well, why aren't you following up, you know, for Caymanians who got denied? Like, your job isn't done. I mean, if that's the case, your job isn't done, because the Caymanians that deserve to get it, that were denied, and they still need to get. So where are you? Like, what that's what we're saying. Like, your job isn't done.
Right. We put the.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
It says that this is beginning to sound like FIFA all over again, and we know how that ended with the Cayman Islands Football Association. That was a hot mess. with lots of illegal things happening there that are now possibly going to land people in jail. So Eden, you were going to say?
Well, that has never been the intention. A lot of quieting has been done just to keep the reputation of the music scene in as good a standing as possible. But what has happened is that it's impossible to stay quiet on it anymore, because the division has to be healed up. The wrongs have to be righted. There comes a time when you have to take a stand, and change requires courage. And so we've been working collectively, reaching out to many different people in the music community, and Caymanians from all over the music community have taken part in think tanks that we've been a part of to help in reopening. We had very good people and very good group of people come up with the policies that we were able to start playing under a couple of weeks ago and start having shows again. And that was not done by Mr. Smith's Cmea. That was done by our music community coming together as independents collectively and raising our voice, organizing our ideas, and taking action on it. And addressing the stipends, in coming up with policies and how we could reopen, in creating, people were very forward thinking in creating ways to adapt to being online during the pandemic, in creating online gigs during the pandemic. And that was all due to huge thanks of people with foresight. And for those folks are people that we have been working with in doing this whole overturning and trying to right the wrongs and bring our music community back to steering on a positive course. And that is that's really what we're about, is trying to work together. And throughout all of those different things, including the initial call for financial aid for the music sector, Notch was not instrumental, or Mr. Smith was not instrumental in those things, and we don't know where he has been outside of raising his voice up about the stipend. And there was efforts made much earlier than he had reached out to CMEA members regarding trying to get our collective voice together and put in as a group, as a sector, and have a voice as a sector for financial aid that was outside of his being involved in that. So it's really interesting. And again, credit where credit is due. He has played some positive roles in helping things happen for musicians. So I want to make that 100% clear, that his intentions and actions are not all bad. This isn't a tear him down type of situation. This is what is really happening type of situation, because to see him go all over media and basically tell half the truth and call us the rogue CMEA when he is in fact the rogue president is it's intolerable. It just reached that point where we felt that now that the financial aid is starting to see a resolution for our music community, that now is the time we need to speak up about this, and we need to try to kind of set the record straight and right this ship as we start to open. And we have ideas cooking, talks with venues, with different people, with government about events, all kinds of things. We have plans for workshops to really empower young musicians and the music community as a whole. We have a lot of positive works to do. And first, the truth as much as possible needs to be laid bare, or at least our side needs to be told. And then we're going to be getting on with positive works as a collective, and keeping check on each other, keeping in touch with each other, working with different people's ideas, and to allow everybody to be empowered and take part in this, because we need all hands on deck. And that's Cmea in a nutshell as well. We need all hands on deck.
Let me just read a few comments here. I know Alric is having, I think, a back and forth conversation with a few people, more about the viability of Caymanian musicians. So not quite the topic that we're having today. Alric, that might be a conversation for another day of how we promote, I guess, local musicians and that sort of thing. But this is really very specific to trying to address the issues that are happening, or clean up the CMEA and the executive issues that have been happening. So James says, from my understanding, Michael Ebanks, Edlin Miles, and Lanny Brown. I don't know what that was in response to, actually. I'm not sure who he was responding to. And then he goes on to say that, as a matter of fact, I was kicked out by Mr. Smith from my executive position, and that was done unconstitutionally for trying to hold him accountable. Brent goes on.
That's a problem.
From the very start of his presidency, his election was unconstitutional. I was the president at the time, and he came in and had an election without giving any executive committee an opportunity to give a report. The AGM was a takeover and not properly executed election. Therefore, Notch's antics have been going on from day one. So that's some 11 years now. Good morning, Elizabeth. Good morning, Miss Darlene. Miss Darlene is tuned in from the UK, as far as I know. She's still in the UK. Thank you, Isadora. So Isadora confirms what Brent is saying, that it was a coup. Clive says a lot of meetings, ... Clive Scotland. I don't know what he means by that.
I think it was saying. I think he was referring to whether or not we have met as an executive committee. Yeah, okay. We've had a lot of meetings.
Yeah. Okay. So Jasmine says, I just want to know how many kinds of power crazed people are ending up in leadership positions in so many different kinds of Cayman's governments and culture. How did this happen, and how do we weed them out? Well, Jasmine,
action.
I think the bottom line is you have to hold people accountable. And I mean, if they're elected, listen, it's one thing if you're power hungry and you are elected the right way. So just like if you're power hungry and you run for politics and the people are silly enough to vote you in, then it is what it is. And the people will have to live with you for the next 4 years. So, you know, just like this organization, if he was duly elected president and there were no challenges, then it is what it is. But to think now that there is a question about him having been removed some 7 months later, and, you know, the Register of Companies is still saying, well, we can only go by what document we have in front of us. And the bank, I'm sure, is probably thinking the same thing.
Same thing. They are. Absolutely. Yeah. So imagine if 2021 came and the people elected a new government, and the premier decided that I'm not going anywhere. I want to stay in the premier. Like how would that work?
Yeah, because I mean, Alden is in his second term as premier. So whilst he can run again as an elected representative, he can't run again as premier. He can't be elected again, I should say, as premier. So yeah, I totally get the point. Like, he couldn't just jump up and say, "Well, you know, I'm going to ignore the Constitution and continue to be premier of the Cayman Islands." Yeah. Marion wants to know she says a lot of meetings, fair enough, but I hope that executive makes the minutes available to in some form to members. If there's any changes coming that will affect the members, they should know.
It's not. We have kept the membership who voted in the exec on January 12th current with what we had. WhatsApp blasts going on. We had complete. You know, our entire thing was based on, we're going to keep you informed.
Transparency.
We're going to and be transparent. We're going to be accountable to you. We want to hear your ideas. We need you involved, because this isn't about a group of executives marching on and doing what they want with the CMEA. This is your CMEA. What do you want us to do with this? How do you want to see us lead? And that was the first GM that we had on March 8th when the dump fire happened. That was why we opened it up to the music community as a whole, including work permit holders and there were Caymanians and founding members and full-time Caymanians. We had a jam to end it. So we played some music at the end of a meeting, something that we've been talking about for I don't know how long to actually do at meetings. And that was part of it. Was that meeting was intended to say, we want to survey you guys. What do you want to see this CMEA look like? Because your opinion and your ideas and your efforts and your experience as a musician on our island matters. And that was a whole new take that hasn't been seen since the administrations that were happening before Mr. Smith took hold. And so they're as far as official minutes or anything like that, minutes of meetings have been taken, but we have no effect on the general membership or the CMEA as an organization because we are not the registered executive. So I want to make that super clear to everyone. We have been very, very good in regards to our maintenance of policy, and especially with the pandemic hitting and stuff like that. There's, of course, things happen, but as far as before that was going on, we were very much keeping everyone informed of everything, keeping members involved, informed, and getting them involved.
So Sandra, yes.
So Sandra, so the irony is, we're the only ones that are interested in complying with the NPO laws and making sure that the organization is run based on its constitution.
Right.
Because I mean that is the key, right, for good governance of an NPO. The first step is making sure that the NPO is following its own rules and regulations. And we flagged this multiple times that in the past we're not following the Constitution, and this should be a big concern. This should be a big concern to those people who want NPOs to stay within its Constitution and to abide by its Constitution and its rules. And I can only think, okay, with this whole CIFA thing, how many people tried to say something about it that were ignored, that were pushed off to the side? How many people, flagged this to someone's attention and say, look, I don't think this is right, and they were just ignored? Like how many people?
Yeah. So just a few comments here. Marion says it's funny how this association with account executive problems are dealing with Fidelity. She's being a little tongue in cheek here because of Fidelity's recent bad press. And she says, "Oh Lord, Scandal season 3, episode 4." And she's ready with the tea. She goes on to say, if Notch was originally submitted as a president, no other information is provided to update them, then ROC would go off of that. And no, it's not a challenge. You need to submit the paperwork. So she's thinking that if you just submit the paperwork to ROC, that's going to do it.
We did, and we had a meeting. That's what people don't understand. We've met with them. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
Because what they said to us when we went with our AGM minutes, it's like, okay, first of all, it needs to be signed. So we went back, we got it signed. All the executive members, we got it signed. So, hey, here you go. And so, well, you need a list of all the members who attended. We went back, we got that. We submitted everything. We've asked them. We've done everything that they've asked us to do, right? And the irony is the person that they say is the president. They don't have the documentation that they asked us to submit.
Right.
They don't have that. So that's I don't understand.
Right.
Wow. So Brent,
I'm looking.
Sorry, Brent says this is worse than CIFA. Oh my God, I hope not. That would be a hot mess. And Darlene says, be sure his sins will find him out. Very cryptic message this morning about
that's not my domain or our domain.
Yeah, people need to pay attention, because I think the point that Darlene makes to that, I think that's a scripture quote, is that at the end of the day, you can only do so much for so long. The saying about you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time kind of thing. So eventually people catch on to what is happening, and people will wise up, and then your entire history of shenanigans and unconstitutional actions come back to haunt you. We even have DJ Vaughn. Big up to DJ Vaughn. He's here this morning. I can't ever recall DJ Vaughn participating anyway. He might listen, but he's never really participated. He said, yep. So,
like I'm looking at Article 39 right now on the original 1983 Constitution, the Memorandum of Articles, and Article 39 states clearly, unless otherwise determined by the association in general meeting, the number of executive committee members shall not be less than 6 nor more than 10. That is, I'm not very good with legalese, but that is about as clear cut as an article can get. As soon as the split from the exec happened in 2019, and once this election took place, the officially registered Cmea, Jean-Eric Smith Cmea, has been functioning under an exec of 3 people. So that is just one, and this is publicly available. I'm not revealing any kind of hidden information here. This document is publicly available. Who is serving on as the executive members currently for Cmea is publicly available. And right now there's a 3-member exec. The Constitution clearly states that it does not function with an exec of less than 6. And that was written in. This document, by the way, is very, very good. It needs to be updated for sure. It needs to be modernized, but it was very well thought out. They did it with Mr. McField as their legal representation, and it had a lot of foresight in it. And the reason that you have many heads coming together is to avoid this type of grasping of power. And and right now you have 3 people sitting on it and 1 person basically completely running the show.
Yeah.
And for me, Sandra, just before you go on, for me, basic compliance is the NPO following its constitution. That is basic compliance.
Right. So we've got someone saying, what about trying to get an audit trail or some sort of audited financials done of the organization? But you can't necessarily bring that person in to conduct that unless you have full access to the bank accounts and all of those.
And therein lies a conundrum.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why we're formalizing the questions that we have. We're formalizing the complaints that we have, and we're still moving on as a music community, because especially during the pandemic, we needed to have a unified voice, and it came unto musicians talking to musicians, entertainers talking to entertainers. There's issues to address as far as a lot of we've heard about disunity in the DJ community, and them really wanting to get together and have a more unified voice on their own, and them seeing as the changes happening as a part of a positive thing. And so we're ready to go on and address these things, but right now we don't have an official conduit to do that. But we do have a thriving, very cooperating music community that is still doing that. So we intend to formalize that and move on with the business of positivity. We can't bring an audit, but what we can do is put the information and put the criticisms into a formal way, and put those into the relevant agencies and say, do what you need to do. And
right. Let's have a look then at the article that was in question, that was in the Cmea Times. So I found some very interesting tidbits here. They talk about this meeting that was alleged to have taken place in March, and I think the title of this article was something like, what did it say? The general Cmea general meeting strikes a note. But it talks about, some of the issues here, how he presented official documents from the Cayman Islands General Registry, which are addressed to Fidelity, listing him as a rightful president and legal controller of the association, of the NPO. The documents had to be produced to the bank, and he claims that that's because someone associated with an outside group had the association bank account restricted, despite being a non-signatory to the CMEA's account. So this is putting forth, obviously, some of his position. He claims that it's now the matter is now under investigation, and notice that there could be serious repercussions for the perpetrators. So he's claiming that you guys are doing something illegal. And it goes on to talk about how he's been involved in the music festival, and he's pushed that, the organization has been around for some 40 years. And he's made this an annual cultural event. The Minister of Culture, the Honorable Dwayne Seymour, noted that it was important for both sides to find a common ground and referenced the rift between Cayman's two carnivals, which we are aware of. And he says that the entities finally coming together as was an example of what needs to happen with respect to the Music and Entertainment Association. He goes on to say that despite the fact that he is friends with the president, he did not mean, that does not mean that he was not impartial. Has the government been useful in any way? I mean, they, give a grant of at least $20,000 on an annual basis to the Music Association. That's not specific to the recent stipends. But do you find that the ministry has been, willing to assist in a resolution of this, or is this just convenient talk in March?
You want to just other?
I mean,
nothing's been done.
We met. Yeah, I mean, we had a meeting with the ROC, and it's.
Have you met with the minister at all?
That's Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he's aware of the situation, and for him showing up at that general meeting on March 1st. I mean, it was clear to me that even though he says he was impartial, that's not the action of an impartial Minister of Culture. If he would show up to that meeting and not show up to ours, because we had one as well where we invited him as well. So impartial is showing up to one and showing up to the other one, not showing up to one.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so we as far as Ministry of Culture goes, we have had no clear contact with them. As far as the registrar goes, the meeting that we had was basically resulted in we can either take legal action that would cost thousands of dollars, that obviously, especially since the pandemic, none of us have, or we can hold another election that is a unified election with Mr. Smith, and that road has been done. As soon as they said that, I'm like, well, I've been down this road plenty times and know exactly where it leads, and that ain't happening, because plain and simple, there's just people who are not interested in working with him, and I think it's unfortunate that the association through Mr. Smith has painted itself into this corner of where we have people who simply, until they see legitimate, significant change happen, are just not interested in getting near it. And I totally understand, because for years I would not touch it.
Wow. So maybe there's some lawyers who are out there listening to this program who will somehow, find a way to donate of their time to help legally get this resolved, because this does sound very much like if he's not willing to budge, you're going to have to get lawyers involved with this to get this resolved. And he doesn't really strike me, like I said, I don't personally know Notch in any way, shape, or form, but he strikes me as a person who will take a position and hold firm to that, probably no matter what.
That's one option, but that takes up a lot of time and resources in doing and what we should be doing. So we have to look at all the options, and ultimately, because we were brought in by our music community, we need to go with what it is that they want to pursue. Right. And what people want to see is positive change. And a year in court, it's, so we'll see what all happens. The options are there.
Because unfortunately, it's the sort of thing where if there's not a clear understanding of, you can do all these positive changes, but you may very well be doing them for naught if there's not a clear recognition of your executive. I mean, you can kind of see where, how many people did you have?
We have other options.
We have other options. I mean, we don't necessarily have to be associated with the music association in order to move music forward in Cayman.
Exactly.
It's not,
And the NPO has space in its registry for other organizations, I understand. So
what our obligation is to make those people who are responsible for regulating NPOs, or our duty is to make sure that they're aware of what's happening.
Right.
And what they do with that information, that's on them. You know.
Right. Okay.
Right. And we also wanted to clear the air a bit with the public, because there's a lot of just perceptions going on.
Yeah.
Exactly. And right now people are like, oh, are there two CMEAs? And there sort of are, but you know, I'm hoping that gets clarified with people, that we have a stance among our music community. We do not have an official stance as far as government registry. So whereas Mr. Smith's CMEA is the opposite. They are officially registered. However, their stance with the music community is not in the best of light right now. So, you know, while we can continue to make music and try to forward our music community and try to be inclusive and try to basically keep sharing, you know, music is about being shared with people, bringing some positivity, giving a way to express things that can't be expressed other ways. And a foundation of playing music with people is a lot of trust happening on stage, is a lot of the idea of unity, that no one person in the band is greater than the song as a whole, as what you're performing at that moment. And even if the singer is at the front of the stage and the spotlight is on him or her, without the band and everybody playing in unison, and one guy not going off and playing a completely different song while you're playing one song, it doesn't work. And that to me is how I've always looked at this, is that we are entertainers, we are musicians. If you can't stand on stage and then all of a sudden I start playing Three Little Birds in the middle of Stand By Me, it can't work. And this is what we've been dealing with for a long time. We all need to be playing the same song, and that is happening in our music community. It's just not happening in an official capacity. So
right. So Judy says, how can the government regulatory body for associations not provide the framework for how the legal executive moves forward? The whole point of having a committee is to prevent one person from assuming control, and yet they refuse to advise now that a situation has arisen. They just shrug their shoulders and that's it. Pretty much.
Can't be enough. That can't be enough.
Right.
So Carlo says, what are the responsibilities and goals of the CMEA? I think, Carlo, from the perspective of this group, they have just explained precisely what their goals are, at least in part. And I would encourage anyone, I guess, who's interested in participating. How many members did you have show up to your election in January?
It was close to 40.
Which at the time met quorum based on the membership list that we had access to. And I do not know where Mr. Smith got the 150 members number that he announced on the radio on March 5th on Radio Cmea. That's on YouTube. Everyone can see it. It's there for perpetuity. I called into the show and asked some simple questions, and he basically wasn't able to satisfy me as a Caymanian full-time musician who feeds my family by playing music for people with answers. So if the CMEA is not applicable to me or many of the other people who are in my same position, including Michael, who is it applicable to? It's like Mr. Bodden says, who are we developing for? What is this association existing for?
Right.
Why does it exist?
And we're not here. We're not here to simply bash people. We're interested in progress. We're interested in music progress. We're interested in unity, because at a time now when we're trying to rebuild our society, unity is key. We won't survive unless we have unity. You know, and I encourage anyone who's interested in being a part of music in Cayman and interested in moving it forward to reach out to either myself or Eden. And you know, and see how we can all work together.
Right. Gary is very active. We've been the people who are on this constitutionally elected exec have been very active even during the pandemic. And one big challenge that is facing musicians all over the world and entertainers all over the world right now is, of course, the lockdowns that have happened, the inability to bring in income from performing for people. So that has set up this whole thing of this whole online presence, this whole virtual festival type of things happening. And and in Cayman, because especially of our population and everything like that, we have to be on top of this stuff. We have to be ready to evolve with this. In order to do that, we need to be unified, and we need to have a a cooperative group that is moving forward saying, hey, what about this idea? Do you know about that? So we have people like Sean Hennings posting on Facebook, hey, we set up a PayPal tip jar, da-da-da-da-da. And we looked into it and I found out how to set up about that. So we want to do a little tutorial on how to do that and make yourself available to get tipped online, how you can run a show out of your home studio. There's still people who are at risk who might be musicians who are going to need to stay home still and not be able to go out to too many shows or do things publicly, even as it opens up. So we need to make sure that these opportunities are there. And to get back to Mr. Carlo Lee, protecting and unifying the musicians of the Cayman Islands is the primary goal of the Music Association and should be the primary goal of any association that comes to represent music. And I want to make it clear, it does not say protecting and uniting Caymanian musicians. It says musicians in the Cayman Islands. So that includes if you're on a permit, if you just got your status last year, if you are like us, we come in from generational Caymanians and going back to founding families, music is a unifying positive force in the world. And if we are sitting here and argue and try to tear each other down and try to divide, we are simply not being true to the spirit of music. And that is unacceptable. And it's time that we start moving forward with that kind of spirit again and remember what it is we're trying to represent. A sacred thing that is more powerful than any single one of us, and that we need to either stand beside it or get behind it. But if we get in front of it, you get run over.
And just a quick point on the interview that you made mention with when he appeared on March the 5th on Talk Today. Notch mentioned that he has this 150 members, which means that the meeting that he had on March the 1st, given the numbers that attended, would have been an unconstitutional meeting based on the required quorum of members.
Correct.
But because Mr. Smith says because he says so, we're all jumping and say, okay, well, it must be sound if he says so, because we trust him. We trust that he's upholding the Constitution. So when he says it, it must be in line with the Constitution. And that's what we've done for years without checking.
So if it really has 150 members, you do the math. It can't add up. It's either or either, but it can't be. And no one's holding him accountable for all of these breaches. No one says, "Hey, look, no, this general meeting isn't constitutional. You can't have it." No one's doing that. Yeah. And I think it's interesting because the registrar of companies, I think Marion was kind of mentioned this earlier, they're not really a body that's there to make decisions about disputes within the internal workings of organizations. That is really left up to the members and the executive. And unfortunately, the only legal remit you have is to legally challenge it in court, to have a judge decide. The ROC, it's not their job to mediate and to decide who's duly elected or whatever. You just have to file the paperwork with them once it happens. And so I think that there's some interesting, legal.
And we were thankful to get that mediation meeting because we know that that's not necessarily their role.
Exactly.
So
So here's what should have happened, Sandra. When we after our AGM, when we went to them and said, "Hey, we're the new executive committee. Here's all the paperwork." What they should have done was put us on. And if Mr. Smith wanted to legally challenge that, then that was his right. That's how that should have worked.
Right.
But that's not how it went down.
Yeah, Carlos, thanks you, Eden, for the response. He says it hasn't been useful for years. Rather, I believe it has been instrumental in stifling the growth of the industry. Change is necessary, and I applaud the efforts of the new executive. All right, folks, we are out of time. 2 hours went by very, very quickly. I want to thank Mike Wiltz and Eden Hurlston, both of the Cayman Islands Music and Entertainment Association, for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having us on the show.
Seems to me like they're the duly elected executive members, along with others who are on the executive. So again, big shout out to this group for trying to bring about some important change within the music and entertainment industry. Folks, get behind this. This is, once again, a government-funded NPO. And so we need to make sure that we are holding people accountable at all levels. we will certainly reach out to the minister to see if he has any response. And I'm going to reach out to a few lawyers as well to see if there's anyone who wants to help you guys resolve this, because I think there has to be a legal resolution. On the one hand, you just go set up your own organization and kind of start from scratch. That is certainly an option.
We could, yeah.
That's probably the easiest thing to do. But at the same time, it allows people like Notch to go unchecked. If what you're saying is true, he continues with the Cmea, and he goes unchecked, and he continues to get funding from government. Government has so much funding available. So if government is now trying to split funding between two organizations, nobody really wins.
We wouldn't get government if we started another organization. We would get our funding by putting on events and raising money and being beholden to the people and to the members, because that is another thing. And things get politicized. Things change every 4 years. So I don't think I didn't think that was a very smart thing necessarily for the CMEA to do. And I don't think it would be a smart thing for any new organization to do necessarily. I don't. And so because we have the sound systems, we have the players. The biggest part of most events is getting a venue and getting the entertainment and the sound system and the PA ready to go. We have that. We have venue relations. We have this is a matter of just simply grasping the power, staying independent, and always number one, being beholden to the members of the music community and to the public at large that we're trying to share the gift of music with.
And one final point, in the midst of the whole COVID situation, there have been these government stipends, which I think Notch again has taken credit for. Just said he was the one who approached the government with this idea for the minister to give out these stipends. Michael, last week we shared a video of you basically saying that there were some issues with how this was being handled, how stipends were distributed or how people were approved. And just to read a comment that came in yesterday from someone who's on one of the sister islands, that person says the music application for stipends was submitted by people on the BRAC, and they hadn't heard anything back. On the other hand, a few others have received payments in the week after applying. If they're not allotting any more funds, at least have the common courtesy to advise these folks. It's this type of behavior or service that takes away from the limelight of how well the country did with managing COVID-19. And then they went on to say, that they really feel bad for some of the musicians who were not able to get the stipend, and all of the firemen who are still employed with the government and do music got paid. All of those who are not employed did not get paid. What the hell? I mean, for real? This is what this person said.
Tell them they can Facebook message or get in touch with me or Michael regarding this, because like I said, we're advocating for people. We put out a public an announcement within the music community and on Facebook about asking about people who had been overlooked. We heard back from a few people. We've been advocating. We've found success in getting assistance from culture to address these shortfalls. And please reach out to us.
And this person says, just for clarity, thanks for exposing this. He says, it's not for me. I have nothing to gain. I can barely play music on YouTube. But really, some BS has gone down. So this person's not even a musician, but they seem to be aware of some of what is happening. Looks like we lost Michael there in the feed. But I want to go ahead and end the program today, thanking both Michael and Eden for joining us. Again, to just add some clarity, provide some background information in terms of what's been happening. And I think it's befitting for us to end the show with a collaboration, COVID-19 collaboration of our national song with a lot of local musicians, entertainers. We have played this to death, I think, on this show, but I absolutely love this rendition. Cmea says, I'm in full support of the new initiative. Well done, gentlemen. Marion says she's going to be coming back for episode 5 of Scandal, featuring the K-Miles Music Association. Hopefully, it will not be a scandal for much longer. We're hoping that this can definitely come to some sort of a resolution. So, Eden, thank you so much again for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I know we lost Mike there, but on his behalf, just thanks for giving us a chance to voice this.
All right, awesome. All right, folks. So let me just pull up this song again. I love this national song. It gives me goosebumps every single time I hear it. Big shout out to all of the musicians who were involved in this collaboration. And it just really goes to show what we can do. I think Mike has just popped back in.
Right.
What we can do with our musical unity. I mean, Michael, we're going to end the song here with playing the national song collab that was done as part of the COVID-19 situation. But again, thank you so much for coming on this morning as the president of the Cayman Islands Music and Entertainment Association, and for sharing a little bit about what has been happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra, for having us on.
All right, folks. So this is our rock out song. Have a beautiful day. Today's Tuesday. I know we feel a little bit off because of the public holiday, but today is Tuesday. So we will be back here at 7 p.m. this evening for a 1-hour evening show. And we're going to delve into what the heck has been happening at Margaritaville. It sounds like it's a hot mess. So let us have a look at some of that. And of course, we'll do a little recap on COVID numbers around the world. I think they're pushing maybe 5 million now. It's just crazy. But we'll have a look at all of those numbers and see what's new and exciting since we last had a session last week. So have a safe day, folks, and we'll see you again this evening.
Cool. Well, guys, right.
Oh, land of soft, fresh breezes, of verdant trees so fair, with the Creator's glory reflected everywhere.
All sea of palest emerald, merging to darkest blue.
Whenever my thoughts fly onward, I always think of you.
In verdant island set,
In blue Caribbean sea, I'm coming very soon.
oh beautiful to thee. Although I wander far,
My heart enshrines thee at homeland. There came Isles I cannot be forget.
Miracle Brokers is back. That's right. We're fully reopened and back to work. Our agents are here to serve you with all of your packing and shipping needs. Need to move? Don't worry. Give us a call today. Collect a package, shipping around the world, or straight to Cayman? You got it. Give us a call on 949-5989. Collection by personalized appointment only, where our dedicated agents are on standby to personally assist you. Don't forget to wear your mask, maintain social distancing, and one person per appointment. Check us out at miraclebrokers.com today.